Hey guys, back with another video review on DLC. Something I think I've only really done once, and it's the DLC for Bloodborne that came out pretty recently, the Old Hunters. I've only done a review for DLC once before, and that was for Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin. And because the Souls games are seriously like the only games where I will actually buy DLC for them, they're that enjoyable, and I just love replaying these games. But one of the complaints I had with Bloodborne was its lack of build variety and weapon variety. And actually, the DLC actually fixes that complaint, mostly at least, because I only imagine myself replaying this game maybe once more, and I played through the DLC as a strength character. I made a new character. I went through like most of the base game and then went through the DLC. I didn't do New Game Plus, but in this DLC, there's a bunch of new weapons, and there's a lot of like really cool arcane weapons and blood tinge weapons as well as skill weapons. So I can actually see myself doing at least 2 more playthroughs of this. Arcane, I've heard Arcane's not that great in this game, at least for the base game, but with the DLC, there's some really cool Arcane stuff that I would love to try out. I've seen my brother do like a blood tinge build, and that looked not that great, but with the DLC, again, there's some really cool weapons. And overall, like, there's way more weapons than I expected there to be. I thought there was only going to be like 5 weapons maybe, but the DLC, there's like at least 10 plus, and all of them seem really cool. With my strength character, I focused, there was only really 2 weapons I really used. That buzz blade thing, and then the hammer. And I guess before I talk too much about this, I'll put it in the description, but there will be spoilers. I'm going to talk about the bosses and some of the areas because like there wouldn't really be much to talk about if it was just a review, a spoiler-free review. And I kind of wanted to talk about my experiences with it and how I got through the DLC and what I thought of it overall. But yeah, like one of the pluses with the DLC is the amount of weapons and the weapons that are hidden here are cool. The one hammer is cool where it's like it doesn't have a transformation, but if you press L1, you kind of light it on fire and it gets fire damage added to it. And I thought that was really cool. I used the fire hammer for like half of the DLC. And then I noticed that the buzzsaw weapon was like a really good strength weapon. If you get it to plus 10, it has S scaling for strength, which was perfect for my character. So I used that for the rest of the playthrough. And I also experimented a little with like some of the other weapons, like their move sets. So yeah, like really cool weapons in this DLC, and I think the build variety is better now because of this DLC. And I'm definitely going to be playing this game more. Not going to do another playthrough right away or anything like that, but I see myself coming back to it like I do with the other Souls games. So, okay, where to start with the DLC? I guess we can start with like the story, kind of. This DLC takes place before the events of the main game, and after you kill Vicar Amelia, you can access the DLC. And I wouldn't recommend going into this DLC right away. Overall, challenge-wise, this DLC is very difficult. I struggled, I'm not going to lie. I struggled through this DLC quite a lot. The actual stages, like the levels themselves, aren't too bad. They're challenging, but they're not too crazy. It's the bosses that are very difficult. And I've heard that this DLC is very difficult when you're doing this game and when you're playing this game like New Game Plus, actually even New Game Plus. And that's why I decided to make a new character, although I've never been a fan of New Game Plus in these games anyways, because it's just increased health and damage, which that to me, that's artificial difficulty and just not fun. But I've heard like the bosses in this DLC have insane amounts of HP and do insane amounts of damage if you're on anything other than New Game. So if you're planning on playing this DLC or buying it soon, I would actually recommend starting a new character like I did, because it was very challenging. Like I said, I struggled through it, but I didn't feel like it was too much. Though I do have one complaint, and my major complaint, I'll just say it right now, my major complaint with the DLC is like the health and damage of the, well, not really the damage of the bosses, but the health of the bosses. Even with a plus 10 weapon, these bosses, like, you do minuscule amounts of damage to them. It like each boss fight takes a long time. It just seems like they have too much health. I personally would have toned it down a bit, because there's nothing more there's nothing more irritating than getting into a boss battle, and it's this amazing boss battle, and you attack it, and you see just like you see yourself doing like just no damage whatsoever on this massive health bar. It's got to say it's not fun. It's not a fun feeling when that happens, and I think the bosses just have too much health in general in this DLC, which is weird because like the actual enemies in the stages don't like the actual enemies in the stages aren't too bad. There's a bunch of NPC hunters that are that are very difficult, and they have more health, but even them, it wasn't too crazy. But like the bosses overall, I think have way too much health personally. Um, Another complaint, which is actually not this is more of a complaint with Bloodborne itself. Uh, like like some of my complaints with Bloodborne. What are my complaints? Well, the build variety, weapon variety, which is mostly I would say fixed now. The summoning system, I think, was a huge step back. It's so hard to find people sometimes. From what I remember, and like it's like there's like a bunch of connection issues, and it was just much simpler with summon signs. Like this is a more convoluted way of doing things. I really didn't like that design decision. The Chalice dungeons, which fuck the Chalice dungeons. I got the platinum for like this DLC, but I still haven't got the platinum for the regular base game because fuck the Chalice dungeons. Like that's probably the worst part of Bloodborne. But overall, this another problem I have with Bloodborne, and this leads into the DLC, and that's the blood vials. I really don't like blood vials, or at least I don't like the fact that they don't regenerate upon death or going back to the Hunter's Dream. Personally, what I would have done is given you 10 or 15 blood vials and had them replenish whenever you die or go back to Hunter's Dream. Because if you run out of blood vials, and I did to one of the bosses in this DLC, I used up, like, I'm serious, 150 blood vials on this one boss. So we'll talk about the bosses soon, but yeah, I ran out and I had to go grind for blood vials, and that fucking sucks. I hate that so much. And to me, it's just like I know Estus flasks are that's kind of like a lore thing, so they can't have Estus flasks in Bloodborne. Maybe they could, I don't know, but um, that would to me like that was an amazing design decision going from Demon Souls to Dark Souls. The Estus flask system was just perfect. I loved that. And I really didn't like how Demon Souls did it, where you had healing items. And to go back to that kind of thing with Bloodborne, with the blood vials, like I complained about this in the full game, but generally, like I guess you could look at it as like if you're good at the game, it's probably not going to bother you because you're never going to have to grind for them. But it was noticeable here because I did have to grind for blood vials, and it's just, I don't know. I personally I don't think it's a good design decision. I do like how you can pop them off quickly in battle, like that's great, but I would have preferred like just like 20 is a lot, right? That you can have 20 at once, and then you can increase that further with runes. But having like 10 to 15 and then just having them replenished, I think would have been much better. And it's almost like From Software knew this was kind of like a bad design decision because one of the bosses, there's like an enemy that you can kill before the boss that will give you 5 blood vials every time you kill him, and this enemy is right in front of this boss. So I don't know. Yeah, not a fan of the blood vials, and it was having to grind for those blood vials to have another attempt at the boss was not fun. But yeah, lore. Okay, let's the story and lore. Well, I guess we'll start there. Like I was saying, it takes place before the events of the main game, and you're kind of in the similar environments. But things have changed. Everything's a little bit differently, or a bit different, and you're not gonna, even though you know the layouts of the environments in the original game, even if you know the layouts, you're not gonna have you're not gonna know exactly where to go in these new areas. Like they've been changed in some really interesting ways. And playing through this DLC really made me want to look up the lore again. Like my mind was quite fuzzy on the lore of Bloodborne, and I still don't know like the actual story in this game. I don't know if anyone really does. I haven't really looked too deep into it, and after I do this video, I'm probably going to actually go on the internet and just to see all these people's theories on the lore and stuff, because I gotta say I was very interested in reading all like the item descriptions you'd find in this DLC. But I guess before the DLC, a new patch came out for Bloodborne. And actually, I hadn't played Bloodborne since like the loading time patch came in. Like I haven't even played it with that patch. So the reduced loading times were pretty great. But there's like a new league added here where there's like an NPC you can talk to, and you can join like a covenant where there's like leaderboards. There's new NPCs that you can summon, and you can even summon these NPCs in Chalice dungeons, which is really cool. So that's like a cool new feature that they added to the game. But yeah, lore-wise, story, I can't really tell you much. But it's certainly there's a lot of interesting stuff in this DLC, and a lot of fucked up shit in this DLC. Like it's very like Bloodborne. Obviously, it's it has like a horror vibe to it, and then the game gets all Lovecraftian later in like the second half. And that carries over into the DLC, but I feel like the DLC is even more horrific and fucked up than the actual game. And some of these locations are just nuts, but I guess we'll kind of go through the DLC from starting to beginning here, talking about the DLC. The first area is, geez, I can't even remember the first area, but it's actually there's the DLC is kind of has like three different areas. Basically, and the first area, I can't remember the name of it, but it's probably my least favorite. There's a lot of NPC hunters here that actually don't that actually respawn when you kill them. They have like these whips, and they're quite tricky. But that first area is still really good. Like I'll just say like that the level design overall in this DLC is absolutely fantastic. Like it's it's so good. Like that combined with just the art direction here is just stellar, and it's just From Software at their absolute best here. But you have like this river of blood area in this first area with some really creepy enemies. I really liked that whole part of this first area, but basically, yeah, just there's no crazy surprises here, but it's challenging. This first area is definitely challenging and rewarding exploration too. If you go off the beaten path and explore to your best ability, you'll find some cool weapons. So that's always great. But we'll talk about the first boss now, Ludwig, which this, for some strange reason, I don't know why, but this is the hardest boss in the DLC. And this is the one where I had to grind out blood vials, because this boss took me, I want to say, probably around 25 times to kill. This boss is absolutely insane. It's a two-part battle. It's got like two phases, and the first phase is actually much more difficult than the second, at least in my opinion. Where his attacks, he just flails around like crazy, and his attacks are so wide. They're so hard to dodge. Like I found like I just couldn't dodge this guy's attacks, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out his patterns. That I swear I just would have to get lucky to even reach the second phase. The second phase, he gets out the Moonlight Sword, and then his attacks are a little easier to dodge. He's still challenging at that point, but the second phase I thought was actually much easier. But yeah, a really cool boss from a visual standpoint. A very important boss in terms of lore. And yeah, it's the music here was like really fantastic too. It's a standout. It's probably one of the best bosses in the DLC. Not my favorite, but I could see how some people would say it's their favorite. A really horrific like design on Ludwig. Absolutely fantastic. So a strong first boss, although probably to me, like honestly, this guy is tied with Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2 as one of the hardest bosses in the entire series. Like I gotta say, he has a lot of health too. He does a ridiculous amount of damage. Like I was starting to, after like 20 deaths, I was starting to be like, geez, I don't know if I can even do this. But eventually I was able to finally take him down. So yeah, killing that boss, you get into the second area, which is my favorite area in the entire DLC. And this area is like, I think that's called the Research Building. And this whole area reminded me of the Duke's Archives from Dark Souls combined with the Tower of Latria from Demon Souls. So all like these really messed up experiments going on, or that happened basically, and like this whole area is so like creepy and fucked up, and you hear the screams of like people that have gone just absolutely insane, and it's the atmosphere here in this area is just insane, and the level design is fantastic. When I finally, because there's this one item I remember, if you see it on this ledge, and the whole time I'm like, how do I get that fucking item? I need to get that item. And eventually you get to the very top of this place, and then you can kind of like, you push a lever, and the whole, like all these staircases get moved around, and then you can access that item. I was like, oh shit, I never would have thought of that. And it's a nice throwback to the Duke's Archives, and nowhere near as convoluted or as confusing as the Duke Archives. It's like it takes that kind of puzzle element and just kind of makes it more simple, I think, and I think it's better for it too. This whole area, there's some interesting NPCs you'll find in this area. some really weird dialogue, some really hidden items like getting that balcony key when I finally got that from giving that, what's her name? Not Amelia, Aveline, I think. Giving her the 2 brain fluids, and then she'll give you the key. That, like, I don't know, this whole second part of the DLC, I absolutely loved it. Like, it was amazing going through here, and I was just like, it's not the most difficult area. I'll be honest, the enemies are fairly weak here, but they can still catch you off guard. But I really loved going through this place up until you reach the boss, which this is one of the bosses. There's 5 bosses in this DLC, and 2 of them I don't really like, which is a bit unfortunate, and this is the first boss I don't really like. What was it called? The Living something or other. Already, I can't remember the name, but it's a bunch of like these big slimy type guys that have like arcane attacks, and they constantly respawn, and they're these giant guys, and you have to keep attacking them, and you'll kill them. You'll kill one, and another one will respawn, and they're shooting arcane bolts all over the place. And the problem I have with this fight is the health. Like, the health on these things is insane. They have more health than any of the other bosses in the DLC, and it's like this fight took me, I want to say, like 10 minutes. And the first, luckily I got them on like second try, I think, but the first try I died. Like, the boss was almost dead, and I died, and that was like a 10-minute fight, just gone. And then I think I used like 15 blood vials, so all of those were gone. It was frustrating. Like this fight, it's a little lazy to me. I don't know. I did not find it enjoyable. It was tedious, lazy. Not a fan of that fight. So it was a shame because I was really enjoying the area, and then I finally get to that boss. I'm like, ugh, this is not good. Luckily, right after that, you're right into another boss, and this boss is my favorite boss in the entire DLC, Maria. A one-on-one battle. She's kind of reminds me of like an NPC hunter, but her moves are really awesome. She's got this really cool weapon, a really fast-paced battle where you really have to be on your toes. Her health wasn't too insane. Her damage was pretty insane, but it's one of those fights that just is like, oh, it felt just so satisfying. That was a really tough battle too. It took me quite a few tries to take her down, but very satisfying when I did. And every fight was fun. She reminded me of the final boss in Bloodborne, Gurman, really, which was my favorite boss in Bloodborne. But yeah, that fight, luckily a terrible boss, and then right into the best boss in the DLC. And then after that, you have the third and final area, which is another area I really liked. It's called the Fishing Hamlet. And it's like this dark kind of, it almost reminded me of like the village in the very beginning of The Evil Within. But it's like this, yeah, it's basically a fishing hamlet. Some really weird like enemies here, really interesting enemy designs. Yeah, rewarding exploration is always, again, not the most difficult area. There's these bigger guys though. There's this area where to get one of the weapons in the DLC, you have to go down this well, and there's these 2 shark-type enemies. They're hard to describe, really amazing enemy design, but there's 2 of them down here, and these guys will wreck your shit. They certainly did wreck mine, and it took me forever to finally kill them, because fighting 2 at once is, like, ridiculous, but I finally did manage to kill them and get that weapon that was down there, although it was a skill weapon, so I didn't really get to try it out. But yeah, this whole area, not much to say. It's just a really creepy area, though. It's the atmosphere is really fantastic. It's a pretty short area too. So after that, you finally reach the final boss of the DLC. I can't remember the name. Before this video, I uploaded a video of my fight with him. But I don't know why I don't remember the name. But this is another great boss battle. I loved this boss battle. Very difficult. It took me like 10 plus tries to get this guy down. He's got some really interesting attacks. Really, again, amazing boss design, like visual, in terms of visuals. In the second phase, he gets crazy. He does have this lightning attack that I think is a little on the cheap side. I don't know exactly how to dodge it. From what I found, the only way was to stop him from doing it, to attack him like crazy before you can pull it off. But you'll see in my video, I ended up getting hit by it. Luckily, I didn't get killed by it, but I did a fight previous to that. But other than that, a really cool fight. Not the hardest fight though. Like, it's weird. Like I was saying before, Ludwig is harder than Maria and this fight and that other more tedious boss before. It's really weird how the final boss of the DLC is not the hardest, but you take him down and then you slay the Nightmare, and that's it with the DLC, with the exception of an optional boss, which is the other terrible boss that I mentioned previous, which is Lawrence. And this is basically a rehash of Vicar Amelia. It's almost the exact same boss, just he's on fire. And the second phase, he kind of like gets split in two almost, and he starts crawling on the ground, and then molten lava just like flies everywhere, and it's constantly flowing from him. And this phase, honestly, I actually feel like it's a little bit cheap. He does have an opening. There are some openings where you can get in and attack him, but it's not often that he'll let you get in and attack him. Like, he's just constantly attacking and shooting fire everywhere, and the molten lava is just flying everywhere and flowing everywhere. It's really irritating. Actually, it took me a while to kill this boss too, but I can't say I really had a good time fighting this boss, because it's basically a rehash of Vicar Amelia, and then it has this really annoying second phase that I feel is just a little on the cheap side. He also has an absurd amount of HP and does a crazy amount of damage. So yeah, I was not a fan of that fight, but luckily that one's optional, and the rune you get from him is not that useful. So it's there. So I mean, that about covers it with the DLC. It's not super lengthy. It took me around 12 hours maybe, so it's not as long as the DLC from Dark Souls 2. I think it's maybe about the same size as Dark Souls 1 DLC. Probably longer though. But it's actually my favorite DLC of the bunch. I think overall I really loved this, even with the two bad bosses, because like the level design and environment design was just amazing. Like some of the best From Software has ever done, really. And then the good bosses here are really, really good. But I'm trying to think what else. Cool weapons, great soundtrack as always. I mean, it's the same great, amazing Bloodborne gameplay. And after playing through this DLC, it's it's definitely one of the best games of the year. Where it's going to stand on my Game of the Year list, we'll have to see. But I can safely say that it's going to be really high up. But anyways, guys, this video has gone on long, but I wanted to go in depth with the DLC, give my full opinions on it and how I kind of got through it and my experiences with it. Have you guys played the DLC? Are you planning on it? I know it's $20. It's highly recommended. If you enjoy Bloodborne, you'll really enjoy this. I had a really great time with it, and it's again, it beefs up the game's build and weapon variety, which is one of my main complaints with Bloodborne. So that's great to see as well. So yeah, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.